Hi guys, so if you don't know, Quarantine is the 2008 American remake of a Spanish film called Rec from 2007. Clearly Quarantine is the better of the two titles, so score an early point for the Americans. But the people who made Rec, they did it first, and I think that deserves a lot of credit. So you know what, let's call it 1-1 as we head to the intro. So I might make this a shorter review than normal because I'm sort of conscious that I've already reviewed this story with Rec a few weeks ago. The two films are very, very similar. So what I think I'll do is just highlight some of the key differences and how I feel about those, and then give you a quick conclusion as to which of the two films I see myself watching again in the future, because I certainly don't need both of these films. I've definitely decided that now. The only reason why I watched both Quarantine and Rec this month is to do these reviews, in all honesty. But one thing I realised when I was watching Quarantine the other night is that I'm pretty sure in my own mind now that I actually watched this first before I ever got to Rec. What I think happened was I was perfectly happy with the American one. I had no intention of checking out the Spanish one. And then I noticed that the Spanish one kept getting sequel after sequel, and that kind of would have galvanised me, I think, into checking out Rec. And once I did, I was just happy with the Spanish ones. I just never went back to Quarantine. I'm not going to give too big an explanation as to what the plot is in this, because I already went into it in quite an in-depth way with my Rec review. So just to be very, very swift, this is basically a zombie film set in an apartment block, and there are a whole bunch of people, residents, firemen, journalists, all trying to survive a zombie outbreak. It's entirely in found footage, which brings me on to mentioning that John Erick Dowdle directs this film. He went on to direct one of my all-time favourite found footage films with As Above, So Below. It's easy for me to think that the work he did on this film would have contributed heavily to him getting the gig for As Above, So Below. In terms of the actors in Quarantine, I think there are a few more people in this that you will recognise, more so than Rec, unless you're actually a Spanish person watching this review from the comforts of your villa in the Costa del Sol. But most people around the world will recognise more people in Quarantine. So we've got Jennifer Carpenter playing Angela Vidal. Straight away, wasn't too happy about that. As soon as I saw her come on in the fire station at the start of this, I just wanted Manuela Velasco back. I'm just so used to Manuela at this point. There's nothing wrong with Jennifer Carpenter's acting. I mean, if you look at her filmography, she's done tons of good stuff, but once you get used to a certain actress playing a certain role, it's like if you watched Sigourney Weaver playing Ripley in Alien for years, and then they did a remake with Margot Robbie playing Ripley. Now, Margot Robbie, for most people, would at least be on the same level as Sigourney Weaver when it comes to acting, but still, you'd watch the new version of Alien and you just want Sigourney Weaver back, wouldn't you? So that's kind of how it is for me with this Angela Vidal character. Nothing wrong with Jennifer Carpenter, but she's just not my Angela Vidal at this stage. We've also got Jay Hernandez in this film. I mainly know him for Hostel from 2006, and further down the cast list we've got Greg German, a name that most people probably don't know, but I guarantee you'll know his face because he's been in absolutely millions of TV shows and films. So on the whole, it's definitely a more famous-ish cast than what you get in Rec, but the quality of the acting, I would say, is the same in both movies. Probably the biggest mistake that the American version makes with this is with the firehouse section at the start. Now, in the original Rec, this was a really great part of the movie. Angela was walking around this place at 1 a.m, 2 a.m. in the morning, and some of the firemen were willing to take part in the documentary. Other employees just didn't want to know. But it felt like a real workplace in the dead of night, and this allowed the story to move really organically into the more fictional zombie stuff later on. But in the American version, there's a totally different feel to this firehouse stuff. All the firemen seemingly are wide awake at 1 a.m. as if it's like the middle of the afternoon. And there's all this kind of flirty back and forth between Angela and the firemen. it stops feeling like a firehouse and more like some college dorm from a slasher movie or something. That there's one moment where Angela's pulled into the men's showers, and there's all this shouting going on, like "Ray!" and there's one really awkward moment where Angela catches one of the firemen saying, "Oh, I bet I can bang her by the end of the night." And it's like, yeah, this doesn't really feel like what this was originally in the first movie. Thankfully, though, once we get to the apartment block, the American version does start taking the film more seriously at that point, and starts copying the original blueprint set out for it. The approach that Quarantine seems to take with the zombie stuff is basically to make sure that it gets all of the best moments from the first film in there. So the body that falls down from high above, the finale, basically repeated verbatim here. The woman handcuffed to the banister, that was downstairs, that was a good bit of the first movie. Quarantine makes sure that it gets all what it perceives to be the key moments, and then just tries to add a few embellishments to that here and there. It goes for a slightly longer runtime, so the first film was a lean and mean hour and 17. Ooh, poetry. Second film goes up to an hour and a half. It just tries to add a little bit more. That seems to be its strategy in order to make itself better than Wreck. The trouble is, it's got off to such a wretched start with the firehouse scene that it's playing catch up for the rest of the movie, really. But there are one or two little extra moments in Quarantine that I've got to give it credit for. So in this version, we get an elevator. This wasn't in the original Wreck. It just gives us a few opportunities for different things happening during the film, although you could make the counter-argument that just having the stairs was more claustrophobic. It made it harder for the characters to move up and down. But given the fact that Quarantine has the elevator, it does make some good use of it. It has a really good kill that I liked a lot. So there's this really smarmy guy in a business suit who tries to escape up to the top floors in the elevator, and the minute the doors open, this zombie dog just jumps on him. It happens really fast, but it was a moment that I really liked. And also, the American version does a little bit more with the soldiers outside the building. In the first film, all you really saw were tarps going down over the windows, and you could hear a distant loudspeaker, but you didn't get much more than that. Quarantine gives you a little bit extra. You see more outlines of the soldiers outside, and there's a bit more dialogue between the soldiers and the residents, and a few more threats and pleas are done, and a bullet gets fired through the window at one point. So you get a bit more. It feels a little bit like the Crazies during these scenes, but thankfully these moments don't go too far. You know, it stays close to what the original film did in terms of keeping the action firmly inside the walls. We don't go outside and start seeing conversations and things going on between whoever's in charge out there. It's just these creepy moments with faceless soldiers. So on the whole, like I said, after a slow start, the American version does start to catch up throughout the film. It throws you a few little moments here and there that are good, that weren't in the original Wreck. But I guess the final question is, does it catch up ultimately, or is Wreck, the original film, still my favourite? I'm going to be sticking with the Spanish version going forwards. There's nothing too much wrong with the American version. It tries a few new things out. It adds some stuff that you won't see in the original Wreck, but it also makes a few mistakes here and there of varying sizes, whereas the original film is just perfect all the way through. So I prefer that one, even though it is a little bit shorter in terms of its runtime. It's not always the case that when the Americans do a remake, they will make an inferior version. When I think of The Ring from 2002, I think that film for me is better than the Japanese original. But the thing is, when the Americans remade The Ring, they did make it quite a bit different. You could almost watch both versions of The Ring in the same week and feel like you're getting a different experience, whereas with Wreck and Quarantine, they're just way too similar to watch in the same week. And I did feel a little bit of fatigue of this story when I was watching Quarantine, just because I've watched Wreck very, very recently. I will quickly show you the version of Quarantine that I bought for this review. Here is my DVD copy. Picture quality, audio, absolutely fine. All that stuff is great. I guess it's a shame that I bought this rather than rented it, because I don't see myself watching this version again. Although I'll keep it on the shelf just in case my kids grow up and get into horror and they want to check it out themselves. I think it was about £4 or £5, this copy. I did go for the DVD version and not the Blu-ray version. Blu-ray's probably slightly more expensive. There are a decent amount of features on this, though. 2008 this came out, back in the days when you did generally get quite a few features with most releases. These days you've got to buy like a really good special edition to get good features, I find. So I'll quickly let you know what's on the disc. There's a commentary by the director and writer-producer. There's a making-of featurette, something called Dressing the Infected, Robert Hall's makeup design, and something called Anatomy of a Stunt. So plenty of stuff on there to get your teeth into if you're interested. I probably won't check that stuff out. If it was the Spanish version, I probably would, but I think my DVD of Rec has basically no features on it. Right, it's time to get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this film. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bloody axes out of 5. This is an excellent film, but just bear in mind, I gave Rec 4.5 out of 5, which is basically the same thing. So obviously I'm going to watch the better one. It seems weird, though, me giving a film 4 out of 5 and yet also saying in the same breath, near enough, that I'm probably never going to watch it again. That has never happened before on this channel. It might never happen again. Look, this is excellent. You might prefer the American version. If you're the sort of person who doesn't like watching subtitled films, then maybe Quarantine will be the one for you. But for me, it's Rec going forwards. So there we have it. Right, I'll be back soon to finish off this review series with Quarantine 2 Terminal. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.